Today, we begin a three-part investigation into one of the most haunting, perplexing, and unnerving disappearances ever recorded on the open sea. I'm talking about the disappearance of 23-year-old Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy was a daughter, a sister, an NCAA athlete, and a young woman who, without a trace, in 1998, disappeared from a cruise ship in the middle of the Caribbean. For the next 27 years, her family has been insisting this is not a case of someone falling overboard. This is not a case of someone wandering off. But despite their certainty, their feeling deep in their gut that Amy is still out there, this is a case where every answer creates three more questions. A case where every timeline has shadows. A case where every eyewitness account seems to contradict the last. Amy's family has spent more than 2 decades fighting for answers on land, at sea, and across international borders because their daughter disappeared on a ship full of people. And the world just kept spinning around. I spoke to Amy's family on an episode of Dr. Phil back in 2005, when this was still a fresh mystery. Now, all these years later, her story is back in the spotlight following a documentary that uncovered new leads. So today, we're looking at it with fresh eyes. You're listening to Mystery and Murder, Analysis by Dr. Phil. Amy Bradley vanished at sea. Now, in case you're new to this, or even if you're not, let's go back to the beginning. In March of 1998, the Bradley family took off on a Caribbean cruise headed for Aruba, Curacao, and St. Thomas. Ron Bradley had won the all-expense-paid vacation through his employer. So the whole family, Ron, Iva, Brad, and Amy, flew from Virginia down to Puerto Rico, where they boarded the Rhapsody of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Amy was 23 years old, a recent Longwood University graduate, a strong swimmer, a trained lifeguard, and she was on the cusp of starting a brand new job with a computer consulting firm. By all accounts, Amy was excited. She was thrilled to spend time with her brother Brad, who was home from college. This was supposed to be a family celebration, a reset, a chance to relax before Amy stepped into the next chapter of her life. For Ron and Iva, this cruise was a moment to freeze time. Just the four of them all together, sharing a cabin before their children scattered fully into adulthood. There was no reason to think anything could or would go wrong. There were no warning signs, no gut feelings, no dark premonitions. Amy's friends confirmed she was excited about the trip and excited about her life before she disappeared. She had a new apartment and a new puppy she planned to return to after some much-needed R&R and some really valued family time. The Bradley family boarded the ship together in Puerto Rico on Sunday, March 21st, 1998. They had no idea it would be the last time they would be together as a unit. Now, to understand Amy's story, you have to understand who she was and the family she came from, and the dynamic that defined that family. Because everything that follows, every decision, every clue, every frantic moment in those first critical hours is all rooted in how this family functioned together. Tight-knit and deeply bonded. Amy Lynn Bradley was born May 12, 1974, in Petersburg, Virginia. She grew up in a home where love was plentiful, expectations were high, and family was at the center of everything. Her parents, Ron and Iva Bradley, raised two children, Amy and her younger brother, Brad. If you watch their interviews today, you can still feel the weight of this tragedy on these parents. This wasn't just a missing persons case. It was an amputation, a ripping away of someone who mattered every single day of their life. These were people that were put on this earth to be parents. Ron, Amy's father, was the steady, patient, level-headed presence. Iva, her mother, was the heart, warm, intuitive, protective. Brad was the little brother who adored his big sister. And Amy, well, Amy was the fireball. She was so athletic, an NCAA Division I basketball player at Longwood University. She was independent, strong-willed, confident, outspoken. She was careful, street smart, situationally aware. She was a young woman who knew how to read a room. And, as I said, she was a lifeguard and a strong swimmer, someone who understood danger and did not take unnecessary risk. Her family said she just was not someone who would just fall off a ship. She was not someone who would just wander away from safety and into danger. And she was not someone who would leave her family without a word. What they now believe is that somewhere on that ship, among those 2,000 passengers and crew, someone may have been watching Amy from the moment she stepped on board. What we need to do is go inside the family's first 24 hours on the Rhapsody of the Seas. Now, why do I say that? Because it was a contradiction of experiences. On the one hand, the first day of the cruise was everything the Bradley family hoped for. They lounged by the pool, explored the ship, ate meals together, and took pictures in the sunshine. Amy and Brad drank fruity cocktails by the deck and laughed about how the cruise photographer always tried to pose them like they were honeymooners. But there were early signs that Amy caught attention wherever she went. Not because she sought it, but because, well, she just naturally drew people in. She was athletic, tan, striking, with a sleeve of tattoos, long before tattoos were common on young women. She was memorable. From the family's very first night aboard the vessel, something caught Ron and Iva Bradley's attention. And they've talked about it in almost every interview since. It wasn't just a one-off moment. It wasn't a single interaction. It was a pattern. Wherever Amy went, the waitstaff, the bartenders, the male crew members, they weren't just noticing her. They seemed to be almost tracking her, taking an interest in her that felt, well, a little too strong. Coming up, here's a guest that doesn't think she's above people that are working here. She's nice and she's friendly. But if someone has a perverse agenda, they might see that as an opening. Ever feel like your tank's running on empty no matter how much sleep you get or how healthy you eat? Sometimes your body is simply missing what it needs to recharge. That's why I trust Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. It delivers 7 forms of magnesium plus vitamin B6, and humic and fulvic acids to help your body absorb and use it efficiently. Magnesium plays a vital role in helping your body relax, recharge, and recover. This formula helps support calm focus, deeper rest, muscle recovery, and overall well-being without artificial colors, preservatives, gluten, or soy. You can feel the difference when your body gets what it needs. So if you want to sleep soundly, stay centered, and power through your day, visit bioptimizers.com/Dr. Phil and give it a try, because real balance starts from the inside out. Ron Bradley says he remembers walking into the dining room and seeing one of the waiters make a beeline towards their table. Not just great service, not just to serve them, but to speak to Amy. He said it felt familiar, like the man already knew her, even though they had just boarded. Iva remembers the same thing, how the male staff would say her name with this odd confidence, how they would strike up conversations that felt more like they were trying to impress her than take her order. Amy noticed it too. She told her mother she didn't really like the way some of the crew were watching her. She said it straight, quote, "It's weird, Mom. They're staring at me." You know, there's a dark humor joke that's gone viral recently. If you don't want to go missing, never light up a room. That's what Amy did. This really goes beyond this. And we have to kind of stop here for a minute, because I want to bust a myth here. You sometimes see a pattern of women that are in abusive relationships, or they get in a pattern of relationships with alcoholics or emotionally or physically abusive men. And people always say, you know, why do they do that? You know, what is it about them that they're drawn to men who have those traits or qualities about them? Why do they pick these losers? Do they think that's all they deserve? Is it because they were abused when they were younger that they go find someone like that? What is it about them that's broken that they seek out that kind of individual? And actually, it's quite the reverse. What happens is these predators, these individuals, are the ones that are doing the hunting. They're the ones that go and seek out certain traits and qualities in those that they target. And maybe it's those that have a big heart. Maybe it's those that aren't so quick to judge. Maybe it's those that tend to be forgiving. But it's not the women that attract the men that abuse or exploit. It's the men that find these victims and certain traits and characteristics that they can exploit. It can be any number of things that trigger this predatory behavior in males. And sadly, it's oftentimes the best traits and characteristics in people that are sniffed out by predators. It's not at all a flaw or a fallacy. In fact, it's the better part of an individual that these predators prey on. So it's exactly the reverse of what people judge. Oftentimes, it's the good nature of a person that predators sniff out and go to. And in this case, Amy was obviously a very optimistic, energetic, vibrant young woman. She was also very attractive. Young males that are probably single and I say that because they're in a very transient industry where they don't have families to be home to tend to, so they can do this kind of job. It's an adventure for a period of time. Go see the world. Maybe, just maybe, they were attracted to not only the physical attributes, but also this energy she put out of being optimistic and energetic and positive. So it is really a tragic situation where you feel like, gosh, being the best that you can be is magnetic to people. Now, the Bradleys didn't want to overthink it at the time. They chalked it up to a young, beautiful woman attracting attention on a vacation cruise, which might explain it 8, 9 out of 10 times. But after Amy vanished, those moments took on a more sinister meaning. Rod said that when he looks back, the crew wasn't being polite, they were being persistent. He said Amy was getting the kind of attention that he notices, but that didn't seem sinister until the worst case scenario became a reality. March 23rd was formal night on Rhapsody of the Seas. Amy dressed in a black, strappy, fitted gown, the same one you've probably seen in that now famous portrait of her and her brother Brad. The family posed for the ship's professional photographer before dinner. And later, Amy changed into more casual clothes and headed out with Brad to the ship's upper disco deck for a late-night calypso party. A Caribbean band called Blue Orchids was performing on board. Amy and Brad met members of the band. They danced, they drank, they socialized, and one band member in particular seemed to take a particular interest in Amy. Witnesses would later recall seeing Amy on the dance floor with him. His name was Alistair Douglas, but on the ship, everyone, staff and guests, referred to him by his nickname, Yellow. Now, one witness's video footage later confirmed that the two did in fact dance, and in the video you can see Amy dancing and laughing with Yellow, looking relaxed as the night stretched on. Now, a lot of things can go on at one time, and I'm not suggesting here that this Alistair Douglas had anything to do with what may have happened with Amy. I'm just reporting the facts. She was involved with him on the dance floor, and she was laughing and dancing. That doesn't mean that at some point that situation didn't turn uncomfortable. It also doesn't mean that it didn't signal to someone from the crew or wait staff that she was approachable or open to interaction in some way. Not inappropriately, but just that she was open to interacting with somebody other than who she came with or other guests on the cruise. This is being run through a filter of anyone that is watching. And if part of that filter is sinister or in some way perverted, it can be interpreted as a message that is other than 99 out of 100 other people might see. Other people might see, wow, here's a guest that doesn't think she's above people that are working here. She's nice and she's friendly and she's just thinks she's like everybody else. And isn't that great? Because oftentimes those that are guests might not think that way. They might think there's some kind of hierarchy. Maybe, maybe not. But here's someone that's young and just seems to be kind of seeing everybody the same way. But if someone has a perverse agenda, they might see that as an opening. They might see that as an opportunity to get close. They might see that as someone that would take their guard down and allow them to get close enough to do something sinister. Coming up, his unease turned into fear, and then the fear turned into certainty. Amy was gone. Allergies can pop up anytime, and this year, they're hitting harder and lasting longer than ever. That means restless nights, sneezing, coughing, and that miserable post-nasal drip that keeps you awake. But there is a solution: Sambrosa Night Syrup. It's made without dyes, synthetic colors, artificial flavors, or high fructose corn syrup. Just a base of nutrient-rich honey, 7 organic herbs, and a small dose of antihistamine that help you breathe easier and sleep deeply. It's soothing yet effective without the harsh side effects. So try it and get allergy relief to get your best night's sleep and wake up rested. Sambrosa Night Syrup is a balanced formula that ensures you wake up energized. Visit Sambrosa.com and use code Dr. Phil for 25% off your first order. With a 90-day guarantee, there's no reason for you not to get the help you need. That's Sambrosa.com, code Dr. Phil for 25% off. When you hear Amy's family talk about these early hours, you can feel the shift. What once felt like harmless vacation, flirtation, interaction suddenly seems sinister and like a red flag. I've often said that how people treat you says more about them than it does about you. If that person treating you is sick, demented, and has a really dark agenda, that says a lot about them and very little about what you are or are not doing. Now, at the time, I don't think anybody goes on a ship like that and says, is there someone here on this staff or this crew or another guest that is capable of doing harm to someone on the ship? You don't go on a vacation with that uppermost in your mind. You certainly don't go on a ship, which is a contained population where people can't escape if something untoward happens. There is a sense of community. There is a sense of accountability. You're on a ship in the ocean and you think, okay, nobody can escape. It can't be a hit and run. So there is a sense of community that goes along with that. It now stands out so starkly that they really can't tell the story without circling back to all of these feelings of her being kind of singled out, kind of like cut out from the herd. Now, all of this would haunt the investigation. Around 3:35 that morning, Brad returned to the family cabin. His keycard entry was logged electronically, and Amy was back 5 minutes later. Her keycard showed that she swiped into the room at 3:40 a.m., and she and Brad sat talking on their private balcony before Brad went to bed. It seems like it was one of those quiet sibling moments that becomes sacred. It certainly becomes special when tragedy strikes because you never know that it is going to be one of those last moments that you spent with someone you loved. Just hours later, Amy would be gone without a trace. After their chat on the balcony, Brad went to bed. Amy decided to stay up a little longer. Between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m., Amy's dad, Ron, woke briefly and glanced out at the balcony. He saw Amy's legs stretched out on the lounge chair and assumed she had just fallen asleep outside, fresh, open sea air. It was the last time anyone in her family would see Amy Bradley ever again. Now, you don't have to take much of a leap to understand how her father and brother are living with guilt and playing the what if game. What if I had stayed up with her? What if when I saw her out there, I had gone to check on her and put a blanket on her or brought her back in? Why didn't I tell her to come inside? When you play that what if game, it can be the most torturous thing you can imagine. But just a few minutes later, between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m., 3 separate witnesses reported seeing Amy on the upper deck. Now, the ship's security system only shows when guests swipe into their room. It does not record when they exit, so there's no electronic record of Amy leaving her room, but witnesses swear they saw her, and according to them, she was again with Alistair, Yellow, the same band member she had been dancing with a few hours before. They said they saw Amy and Yellow riding the elevator up to one of the ship's upper decks together. Those same witnesses said that shortly after 6 a.m., they saw Yellow again, but this time he was alone. So around 5:30 or 5:45, 3 witnesses say they saw them together. About 15 minutes later, they see Yellow alone. At the same time, Ron woke up again and noticed his daughter was no longer on the lounge chair on the balcony. He later said he had a sudden uneasy feeling. He can't explain it. It was just something instinctual, something he just couldn't explain. He sat up, he looked towards the balcony, gone. Now, look, these thoughts, these feelings are hard to quantify. They are. But if you're a parent, you know that there is a connection between you and your children. A psychic connection, a genetic bond, whatever you want to call it. You just have this feeling about your children. Can we quantify it? Is there a way to measure it? Is there some area of the brain that is triggered? And maybe it's just anxiety. I'm not sure that we really know. You always hear the saying, trust your gut. He did have an instinct, a feeling of connection, and it's the same feeling that leads Amy's family to say they believe she is still alive to this day. They say they can feel her. They say they'd know if she was dead. Now, how accurate are those feelings? It's hard to say. Hope springs eternal. It's hard to know if these are connections and instincts, or if hope is so strong and so powerful and denial is so strong that it pushes everything off the radar screen to the point that you just can't or don't want to admit to yourself what is a more likely reality. I mean, it's hard to say, and who am I to rule on what is the answer to this mystery? I certainly don't know. After noticing Amy was no longer on the balcony, he did get up. It was a strong enough feeling that he didn't just say, she finally went to bed. He got up. He walked outside. He scanned the horizon. The early morning light was spreading across the Caribbean, but it was very early, so the ship was calm. It was silent. It was peaceful. And he started to notice things. He noticed her shoes were still in the cabin. Her ID was still in the cabin. Her purse, cigarettes, clothes, they were all still there. Everything she would have taken with her if she left the cabin was untouched. Ron thought, well, maybe she had gone to get coffee. Maybe she had gone for a walk. Maybe she was watching the sunrise. What he did know is she wasn't there. Ron Bradley was a father and one who knew his daughter well, and something in his gut told him that none of those explanations made sense. He knew her. He knew she wouldn't go off with nothing in her hands. He sprung into action. He wanted to find Amy before her mother woke up, so he walked the ship. He checked the decks. He checked the hallways. He checked the lounges. Nothing. He looped the ship again. Nothing. His unease turned into fear, and then the fear turned into certainty. Amy was gone. By 6:30 a.m., and understand, only an hour has passed now, the Bradleys are in full-blown panic. They went to the ship's security officers and begged them to make an announcement over the intercom, lock the ship down, stop the passengers from leaving when they docked for their day trip. They also asked that the staff conduct a ship-wide search immediately. None of that happened. What they got instead, which shocked them, was resistance. The ship's staff refused to make an announcement. They claimed they didn't want to alarm or wake up other guests by sending a ship-wide message over the loudspeakers. They refused to lock down exits. They refused to stop people from leaving. They continued preparations to dock as if nothing were wrong. Amy was missing on a vessel in the middle of open water, a vessel that was minutes away from allowing thousands of people to walk off freely. The family begged, please don't let anyone leave. Please search before you open that gangway. Please, our daughter is missing. But the ship did none of that. They did not stop. The ship did not secure passengers. The ship did not act as if a 23-year-old woman was in danger. To this day, this moment is seen as one of the most catastrophic failures in the entire case. Now, you may be thinking, 2020 hindsight is great, but at the time, the ship's crew doesn't know that she's missing. She could have been in another guest room. She could have made friends with some other young woman, and they could have been chit-chatting in that person's cabin, or she could have met some young man. Who knows? She could have been 1,000 different places. So maybe they didn't want to panic the whole ship or whatever just because they couldn't find somebody after a 30-minute search of the boat. But there's at least middle ground. There are some things they could have done, right? They could have done some backtracking. They could have alerted security on the ship. If they were going to open the ship, they could have monitored who was getting off and had records of that. They could have checked every place that she was known to have been. If her brother knew that she had been dancing with a band member, they could have immediately investigated that. He was an employee, at least an independent contractor with accountability. There are a number of things they could have done short of disrupting the entire cruise for everybody on board if that was their concern. There were a number of intermediate steps they could have done, but they did nothing. Believe it or not, while Ron Bradley is out tearing through that ship looking for his daughter and begging the ship to make an announcement and halt passengers from disembarking, the cabin attendant goes right into their room and cleans it. Beds made, trash emptied, towels replaced, the whole 9 yards. So before security is even notified, before anybody takes a hard look at the scene, that room, the one place Amy was last known to be, is wiped down like it's just another day at sea. If you're trying to preserve evidence, that's the worst possible thing you can do. But that's exactly what happened. Now, they may not have agreed with Ron that something bad had taken place, but they could have at least said, oh, okay, we're going to get our security officers up here and let's go start investigating. Where was the last place you saw her? Well, the last place I saw her was on the balcony around 5:30, between 5:30 and 5:45. And a lot of her things are in her room. If something had happened, there's contact DNA. There could have been a note with a name and a cell number. Anything could have been vacuumed up, thrown away, wastebaskets emptied. All sorts of things that could have been clues that could have led to something. And if they had a competent security officer or officers, the first thing they would have said is, let's backtrack. Where's the last place you saw her? Let's go there. Let's start retracing her steps. How easy would it have been for her to fall off of that balcony? How high up off the water was it? Where was the ship at that time? Let's get boats in the water. They were very close. She's a strong swimmer. If a fall wouldn't have incapacitated her or killed her, this was a trained lifeguard and swimmer. She may have been able to swim to shore. Let's do some reconstruction. Let's figure this out. But none of that took place. What clues were lost? If it had been cleaned, it couldn't have been cleaned very long. Who cleaned it? Let's go find that cart. Let's process that cart. If the room had been cleaned and therefore the crime scene contaminated or destroyed, then now the cart becomes a crime scene. Let's go get that cart, seize that, and start going through it and see if there's anything from that room that could tell us anything. Did something happen in the room? Are there clues in the room? If things in the room have been moved to the cart, then the cart becomes a crime scene. At 7:50 a.m., okay, now this is 2 hours later, the first public announcement was made. They called for Amy to report to the purser's office. They didn't alert other guests to be on the lookout or ask for information. Finally, hours after they had been alerted Amy was missing, the ship agreed to conduct a search. Royal Caribbean claimed they had searched everywhere. The Bradley family would later learn that this was simply not true. They just don't believe it was a real search. They believed they checked common areas, bathrooms. They looked in places anyone would look for a lost item, not a missing human being. They did not search rooms. They did not question passengers. They did not question crew. They did not set up checkpoints. And again, they definitely did not stop anyone from disembarking. By the time ship security even started their search, thousands of vacationers had spilled down the gangway and onto the land, including any person who might have harmed Amy, or trafficked her, or taken her off that vessel alive. Ron, Iva, and Brad were left pacing the nearly empty ship, calling Amy's name, begging anyone who would listen to help them. Had she been roofied? Had two guys, one on each side, holding her up, walked her down the gangplank and said, "Oh, she's a little hungover, ha ha ha," and walked her off? Who knows? There's a moment in every disappearance case where the family shifts from hope to terror. For the Bradleys, that moment came when they realized that Amy, without her shoes, without her ID, without her cigarettes, without a single reason to leave, was no longer on that ship. One moment she was on that ship, the next moment she was not. She had been spotted alive on the deck at 5:30 a.m., and by 6 a.m., she was gone. And the ship let thousands of passengers walk off before anyone was even paying attention to who was walking off of that ship or in what condition or shape they were walking off that ship. It's the kind of mistake that, frankly, is hard to comprehend. It's the kind that changes an investigation from challenging to nearly impossible, and yet the Bradleys did not give up. By the end of day one, the Bradley family was traumatized, exhausted, and absolutely furious. They had begged for basic investigative procedure and instead felt like they were treated like they were an inconvenience. As night fell in Curacao, somewhere out there, whether on that island, in the water, on another boat, or in the hands of someone who meant her harm, Amy Lynn Bradley was missing and without help. The Bradleys knew one thing for certain: whatever had happened to Amy, it had happened fast. It had happened silently. They had one daughter, one sister. They intended to find her and bring her home. And the clock, it was already working against them. At first, investigators leaned into the idea that Amy likely fell overboard or even took her own life. One of the main pieces of evidence that suggests she may have gone overboard, whether she fell or jumped, was because when the Bradleys returned to her room, they noticed something strange on their balcony, something that makes absolutely no sense. The cleaning crew had done a sweep of the room, but they didn't move anything on the balcony. Amy's family noticed the little table out there had been shoved right up against the railing, almost as if someone moved it there to stand on top of it. Could it have been so Amy could jump? Or could she have climbed up for another reason and then fallen over? Amy was last seen out on that balcony just before dawn. She was tired, she had been up late, and she was close to the railing. People point to that and say, well, maybe she leaned over, maybe she slipped, maybe it was just one wrong move. And sure, on paper, that sounds like a possibility. Royal Caribbean themselves initially leaned into the accident angle. Now, whether that was genuine concern or corporate damage control, well, that's another conversation, but it did shape early thinking. When investigators first checked, they didn't find signs of a struggle, no damage, no blood, nothing torn up. So some folks say, well, if there wasn't foul play, maybe she just fell. I have to tell you, I'm one of those people that doesn't really subscribe much to the accident theory. First off, I totally dismiss suicide because suicide doesn't happen out of the blue. When you deconstruct a person's life that has chosen suicide, it's never out of the blue. There are always warning signs, perhaps missed, but with 20/20 hindsight, you see them. They're just simply not there in Amy's life. There was so much forward thinking. There was positivity. She was excited about her future plans. She was confident. She had a plan. There were so many things that she was looking forward to. In deconstructing all of that, there was no sense that she thought she was a burden to those that she loved. There was no foreboding event on her future horizon that she couldn't face. No big mood swings that she might have got caught at the bottom of a mood cycle. There's just nothing there. Amy just doesn't fit the profile. I don't think accidents just happen either. You can identify accident-enabling factors. Certain things have to happen leading up to the event that people refer to as an accident. This was a very athletic young woman. She was a strong swimmer. She was trained. She was also situationally aware. She's not given to high-risk, reckless behaviors, to stand on a table that's not meant to be stood on, lean out over a rail on a moving ship in the dark. What is she looking at? When you're at sea at night, it's pitch black. Standing 2 feet higher doesn't make it any less pitch black. There's nothing to see if you're 2 feet taller than if you're not 2 feet taller. You can't look up, you can't look down, it's pitch black. There was not a shred of physical evidence to back up the theory of suicide or that she was so situationally unaware that she put herself on top of a table and lean out over a rail and fall off a ship. Had she been at a club? She had, but no witness indicates that she was staggering, stumbling, drunk. If she had been drugged or roofied, her brother would have noticed. He sat on the balcony and talked to her. He didn't say, oh man, she was totally out of it. She couldn't even talk, focus, concentrate, or anything of the sort. He would not have left her on the balcony if she had been incapacitated in some way. Just none of it adds up. Just doesn't make sense. So here's someone that seems to be in possession of her faculties, had a bright future. It just doesn't make sense. She was anxious about the men on the ship. She did not want to be alone. None of this adds up to her disappearing of her own choice. So those explanations, they got ruled out by the family real fast, and I think there is good reason for them to be ruled out. Still, investigators thought man overboard, one way or another, was the most likely scenario. And you have to put that on the list because she's on the ship one minute and not the next. So you have to consider that she went overboard. Whether she was thrown overboard or fell overboard, you have to consider that. Of course, it would be foolish to not think about that. For the first 4 days, the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard scoured the waters off Curacao, running helicopters, radar-equipped aircraft, and boats over every square inch they could cover. But even after all that, not a single trace of Amy. Nothing. Royal Caribbean even brought in their own private boat once the official search wrapped up, and still zero evidence. Based on the location of the ship during the time of her disappearance, if she did go overboard, being a strong swimmer, she was close enough that there is the possibility she could swim to shore. This was a young woman that was trained, strong, confident, disciplined. She could have been knocked unconscious, falling off a boat like that, depending on how she landed. So you don't know, but you would think that there would be some evidence in some way eventually. If you've ever been on a cruise, you know those cabins are tight. Would she have screamed? Would her family have heard something as they all slept together in the same room? Some have wondered if she may have been killed on the ship and thrown overboard. But whether an accident or foul play, if she went overboard, you would think that her body may have washed up in a very specific area due to the currents and the tides. It didn't. In her family's hearts, they knew Amy was no longer anywhere on that ship, but they never believed she went overboard. So they began to suspect she was taken or lured off at that port. Some suggest, well, what if Amy was killed on the ship and whoever harmed her was able to remove her body unnoticed among the sea of passengers as they disembarked? But her family doesn't buy that. They're certain Amy was taken off that ship and taken off alive. Some say that's because they just don't want to accept the obvious. And like I say, hope springs eternal. A family wants to hold on to hope. Of course they do. But that doesn't mean that you can dismiss that. And her brother has even acknowledged that publicly. It's easier to believe that she was taken and is still out there. But there's blind hope, and then there's hope that's based on fact. And about a month after Amy's disappearance, the Bradleys got a fact that changed everything. A local cab driver claiming he not only saw Amy, but he spoke to Amy Bradley. He claimed she approached his cab on the day the Rhapsody of the Sea docked, the same day she vanished. And as time passed, he wouldn't be the only one to claim he saw her in the Caribbean. So did she leave that ship alive? She was focused on by males on that ship. Was she drugged in some way that she could walk but not resist? Did she have a gun or knife in her back and walked off as though she were a couple? Was she kidnapped? If you've seen these cruise ships, people go off en masse. It would be easy to blend. Is Amy Bradley still out there alive today? And that's exactly what we're going to explore on the next episode of Mystery and Murder, Analysis by Dr. Phil. Click subscribe because you don't want to miss a video episode on YouTube or the audio wherever you listen to your podcast. We're going to keep digging into this. We'll see you next time.